All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Clay Malcolm here at Advanta IRA, and my guest today is John Denza, Chief Commercial Officer at AirSex. John, how are you today?
Good. Thank you for hosting me today, Clay. It's a pleasure.
I'm delighted. I'm really excited about this event, and I know that we're going to talk about some things that are interesting to everybody in terms of how their IRA and frankly probably their personal funds as well invest in cryptocurrency and what's going on there. So I appreciate you joining me and look forward to the event. All right, everybody. So what's going to go on today from a housekeeping standpoint is I'm going to talk a little bit about IRAs and the ways that IRAs can invest in cryptocurrency and a little bit of the state of how that has evolved. And then really I'm going to turn it over to John for the bulk of the presentation because he's going to talk about the way that AirSex is interacting with IRAs in a different way and generally speaking how AirSex is operating in the space. We encourage you to ask questions, so if you can do that in the question console, that would be great. So go ahead and type those in as they occur to you. We'll answer them probably after the slides and the kind of the discussion that we're going to have initially. But please go ahead and feel free to type those in, and we will get to them at the end. And I think that with that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so all the information today is for education purposes only. At Advanta IRA, we do not give tax, legal, or investment advice. We don't advocate any particular investment strategy or investment vendor. And we certainly encourage you to talk to your financial team anytime that you're considering an investment for your IRA. Our role in the equation is a very neutral one. We are the institution that is in charge of custody of the account as well as the administration. So really what we're doing is the bookkeeping for the account's activities so that it gets to keep the tax advantages. But again, we don't give any tax, legal, investment advice. We're not telling you what to buy, when to sell, any of that kind of thing. And when it comes to Advanta, we're a company that really was set up to be a self-directed IRA provider, specializing in alternative assets, and we were built from a customer service standpoint. So we have very experienced employees. The company spends a lot of money on our ongoing education. We're set up so that every account holder gets a two-man team here at Advanta, an education person like myself, as well as a account manager, which is kind of the back office paperwork person. So you have that two-man team. You always know where to go for information, and we're happy to talk to you, have our phone numbers and our emails and all that kind of thing, so that you actually do get some personal service. And I will go ahead and say that I've been a self-directed IRA investor for 10 years, and I'm also a cryptocurrency investor, so I'm doubly excited about the content today. But I do understand the ways that IRA investment work and the mechanisms that have to go into proper documentation and that kind of thing. So I can really have empathy for how we all get our investments made and kind of how that process works. So again, we're here for you. We want to be a personal connection, have a relationship with you, and try to make it so that your IRA investment strategy goes as smoothly as possible, because it is your strategy. You're telling us what you want to do. And remember, when we're talking about self-directed IRAs, when it comes to alternative assets, we're really talking about the combination of an account type that has certain tax advantages with alternative assets. So the account types are the ones that you already know: traditional, Roth, solo 401k, SEP IRA. A lot of people may not be familiar with the fact that your health savings account is also an individual custodial account and can invest in alternatives. And particularly with cryptocurrency, because the cash threshold can be quite low, you have the ability to invest that money and make funds for your qualified medical expenses. So understand that these account types are the same. The only thing that's really changing by virtue of having your account at Advanta, as opposed to maybe a bank or brokerage house, is that it can invest in alternative assets, not just publicly traded securities like stocks and mutual funds. So what are the assets that are available for your Advanta account? Well, they're myriad, but the popular ones are usually, real estate. That could be commercial or residential. Private lending, so your IRA can be a lender, can buy existing notes or originate them. Precious metals is a popular category as well: gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. Certainly cryptocurrency, which we're going to focus on today. And private equity is another one that gets a lot of interest because it means investing in private companies. Sometimes that's a startup, Sometimes it's a company that you know, things like that. So you have a lot of ability to invest in something that you may have an expertise in or some inside knowledge on. So it really is an opportunity for you to exercise that expertise and combine it with the tax advantages. Now, one of the reasons that I was really excited to get John on today and to talk about the relationship between an IRA custodian and an exchange is because, you know, it really has been difficult up to this point, and there's a couple of reasons for it. One, an IRA is its own legal and financial entity, and it operates kind of like a trust. The custodian is obviously the signer for the IRA and handling the money. And so there are some restrictions in terms of the way that the money can interact with the account holder, because while it's in the account, it's really under the purview of the custodian. And so that makes the entire setup of an IRA establishing an account at an exchange a little bit more complex, especially because exchanges have a lot of obligations in terms of knowing their clients and the regulatory things that go into being an exchange where you're changing fiat currency into cryptocurrency and back again. So all those things make the relationship between the two organizations, the custodian and the exchange, it's been hard. And frankly, you know, this whole asset class and the exchange business model has not been around that long, and they've certainly been having to adjust to all kinds of changes in that environment over the years of their existence. So one of the things that's interesting now is that relationship is becoming a little bit easier as exchanges have had more time to kind of develop the way that they're doing business and to understand the way IRAs work. We're starting to get relationships where in the past, it's been a little bit difficult for your IRA to invest directly with an exchange and do that simply and inexpensively. You know, certainly people have accomplished it, but it's been quite expensive and clunky and time consuming. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about today is basically the new generation, the new way that this can be done, where the IRA has direct investment with the exchange. Now, for a lot of the times that Advanta has handled cryptocurrency, we've said, hey, you need to have an LLC in the middle, because an LLC could then go to the exchange and set up an account, and it's a little bit less unknown or exotic than an IRA, which again is a small trust. So LLCs are a little bit better known. So we've often said to folks, if you want to invest in cryptocurrency, invest in an LLC first. It's often called checkbook control, and then go to the LLC can go to the exchange. Now you can still do that, and it's absolutely a workable scenario, and you can do it with AirSex as well. So this is not something that's gone by the wayside, but this new relationship that we're being able to form with exchanges now means that you can have a little bit more direct connection, and it looks basically like this. The account holder has accounts at both the exchange and with Advanta, and the money is able to flow back and forth between Advanta and the exchange without any, you know, need for us to safeguard the way that money flows. And also it allows the exchange to know exactly where the money goes to and from, right? So it's really a relationship that's much more direct. And as I say, now that there's the ability for that direct relationship to be inexpensive and relatively quick, then the playing field is changing. Right, so that's really what we're going to be talking about here today. And I do want to just stress that, you know, again, we don't do any due diligence on any of the assets that our account holders buy or any of the vendors and things like that. So there are a lot of things to think about when you are investing in cryptocurrency. This is a short list. It's by no means comprehensive, but, you know, are you going to be a buy and hold buyer, or are you going to be a trader? If those needs are different, in terms of the exchange that you choose and the model in which you engage your IRA in the cryptocurrency investing. The cryptocurrencies that are available are usually up to the exchange that you choose. So that's something, if you have a particular one that you're looking to get into, you need to make sure that the setup that your IRA is getting into can accomplish that investment goal. Speed and the timing of you know, the marketplace in cryptocurrencies can be quite volatile, right? So making sure that you have the ability to buy and sell when you want to, and that you can do so in a timely manner is something to look into. What kind of technology do you need? You know, exchanges are, as I say, they're very interested, and they need to be engaged in the technology and all kinds of security, as well as know your client rules and things like that. And so, you know, you need to find out what they require from you so that you can interact with them in a timely manner as well. You may want to use multiple exchanges. If so, you need to make sure that you have the setup proper for that. Storage, John's going to talk a little bit about storage today, so whether that's online or offline and things like that. Imagining how your IRA is going to have that storage set up is an important thing. Is there insurance? If so, what's the level and what's it on? How do you get your cash? In other words, what does the platform look like? If it's a platform, or is it something that's more manual than that? And then obviously costs, so return on investment, things like that. So this is just a partial list of the things that you'll want to consider when you're thinking about cryptocurrency as an investment for your IRA. And I'm going to, in a slide here or two, I'm going to just turn it over to John for the real meat of the presentation today. But I do want to remind you that we do have a lot of educational resources at Advanta IRA. We want you to be able to research the investments that you want to make and to be able to make informed decisions. So please take advantage of our events, blog, as well as all the other educational offerings that we allow. So, and the website as well is very robust when it comes to that. And remember that this process is really pretty easy. If you have an IRA somewhere else at a bank or brokerage house, or an old 401k where you no longer work, it's very common to be able to open an IRA with us, fund it with a transfer or rollover, and then choose your investment. And the process is really not something that has to take a lot of time, and it's a relatively easy one as long as you work with a company that is willing to tell you how it works and be a partner in that endeavor. Okay. So that's really my part of the presentation. So if you got nothing from that, your IRA can invest in cryptocurrency, and the relationship between exchanges and custodians is starting to change. And so I'm really delighted to welcome John Denza, Chief Commercial Officer at AirSex today. And John, I'm going to go ahead and we'll do the screen sharing so that you can put up your materials.
All right.
And like I say, for those of you who have questions, let's go ahead and, if you have them already, go ahead and type them into the questions box. We will be handling them at the end of the presentation. So John, I do see your slides there. So you have the screen now. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just, John, let you take it away, and then we'll converse as we go.
Perfect. So I figured, thank you first off for Advanta hosting me today, as I mentioned earlier, and thank you for having me, Clay. I think before to kick things off, just a little bit of a background on myself. I've got 20 years of capital markets experience, having spent time at exchanges that your audience have probably heard of before, which include NASDAQ, CBOE, BATS, also worked at Instant for a while, always in a sales and an account management capacity, having been focused on, I'd say, equities and options. I've probably launched in my career about 8 to 10 different exchanges. And then about 6 years ago, I started researching crypto and looking at Bitcoin. And as many do, I fell down the rabbit hole and got sucked in. And I really saw the parallels between what's been going on over my career in traditional capital markets and what was happening in crypto. It was almost like watching things in fast forward, issues or concerns with routing and market data and so forth. And I saw that the regulation was going to be following too. So I got sucked in, and about 2.5 years ago, I started working at AirSex, and I've really enjoyed my time here. That being said, I figured it'd be best to maybe, before I dig into my slides and give you an overview of AirSex, I thought it would be helpful for the audience to understand what is blockchain and what is cryptocurrency. And I always like to use analogies. I think analogies are best when describing different products, so the audience could have a stronger grasp of the subject matter. So to start off, I'd like to talk about cryptocurrency. So I always like to use the gold versus Bitcoin comparison. And people want to understand, what is Bitcoin? It's a store of value. So think about it this way. If you were going to go into, let's say, a Starbucks, and you went to the counter and you had gold, you had a gold bar, it would be physically, one, difficult to bring the gold bar into the store, and they wouldn't really be able to make change for you. It'd be difficult to show them a gold bar and say, I'd like to buy a latte with this. Well, cryptocurrency is the opposite. Everything is in digital. I know that some of your audience probably go to a Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks, and when they go to the counter, they have that little barcode that's on their app, and they flash that barcode and it automatically debits from their account. Well, cryptocurrency is the same way. It's similar in the sense that it's digital money in a sense, digital store of gold. I mean, it's digital store of money. So think about it. If you were going to go to purchase goods, you could use that barcode and it would automatically debit from your account and it would go out multiple decimal places into fractions of a penny. So that's an overview of Bitcoin. And then people ask, what is Ethereum? Ethereum's a little bit different. So Ethereum is what's called a smart contract. Smart contract is basically you're packaging up some information. So think about it this way. I always like to use the vending machine analogy. So if you go to a vending machine and you want to buy a Kit Kat bar, you put the Kit Kat bar is, let's say, $1. You have 75 cents, you put it in the machine, you hit A3, the bar doesn't fall down. You're not getting it because you didn't put enough money in. You try again, you put an extra 20 cents in, you hit A3, it's not going to happen. You finally finish and you put $1 in there, hit A3, the Kit Kat bar falls. It's basically an if then. If I do this, then this will happen. That's in its simplest terms what a smart contract is. So Bitcoin is a store of a digital store of value. Ethereum is a smart contract, and then that premise carries to all the other coins within the cryptocurrency universe. Now, people wonder, what is blockchain? Blockchain, in its simplest form, is basically, think of it as having an oversized Excel spreadsheet where everybody can update the information dynamically, everybody can see it, and when you put updates into that spreadsheet, it's immutable. So you can't go in and alter somebody else's work because that history is set in stone on the blockchain. So that's what blockchain is in its simplest form. So with that being said, love to walk you through an overview of AirSex. I'm going to take you to the slides. You should see the AirSex logo in the beginning there, right, Clay? On my screen?
Yes, I have your first slide. It doesn't look like it's in presentation mode because we can see the slides on the side, but I do see it.
Okay, so should I do do I need to click on something to put it into presentation mode, or are you able to see the center of my screen that says overview?
I see it just fine. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So next I'm going to walk you through kind of the history of AirSex and how we came to be. So the company, I'd say about 7-8 years ago, created an interest rate swap futures product. And when they did that, the original investors went out and they petitioned the CFTC and they were able to garner what's called a DCM, which is a designated contract market status. In its simplest form, that means we're able to operate a futures exchange. So they created this product, but when you have a futures product, you need to use what's called the DCO. The DCO allows you to clear the futures trade. So they had this product, it's trading on our exchange, but they were going to the CME to clear the product because they held the DCO. Fast forward, they end up licensing the IP to the CME, and the original investors, some of them include, and I'll go through a slide in a bit of the investors, but include names like DRW, which is one of the original cryptocurrency market makers, which is Cumberland, CTC, and some others, recognize that for there to be institutional adoption within the space, there needed to be compliance, transparency, and regulation. So what they did was they first started and formed a consortium, which I'll discuss in a minute, and then they started going out and obtaining different licenses. Those licenses included in, I'd say, June, July of 2019, we were actually able to obtain our own DCO, which allows us to clear futures trades. Then we proceeded to go out and petition each of the states to get the money transmitter licenses, which no two states are identical. It takes some time, but we were able to secure 50 money transmitter licenses throughout the US over the past year and a half. And then also during that period, I don't know how much of your audience knows this, but in New York, the license is a little bit different. You have to go out to the New York Department of Financial Services and petition them for what's called a BIT license. Our BIT license was approved, I believe, in April 2020, roughly. And since that time, I think maybe only one other participant has actually been approved. And there might be 20 to 30 other firms that are pending to try to get this license. And also to take a step back with that DCO is on the federal level, and it's extremely difficult to obtain as well because there's only been about a dozen exchanges that have actually been approved for this. Those include ICE and CME. So we end up getting these licenses, and then in I would say April 2019, we launched our spot trading exchange. So we launched spot trading at that point. In December of 2019, We launched our own new proprietary trading technology, which is our new matching engine, which we actually control the code to. And then also we launched physically settled futures. And then in last year, I would say in 2020, we were the first ones to get approved for the ETH futures, which is something that the CME has recently picked up. We created our own cash settled futures product in addition to physically settled futures. And then at the tail end of last year, we focused on margin. We actually applied to the CFTC for a margin application, which we officially filed in December of 2019. So it's been a busy year. We've been building all this infrastructure. And then I would say in 2021, we started having inbound interest from the IRA providers where their participants wanted to diversify their portfolios. And that's how Clay and I were able to connect and work with the team at Advanta, which has just been amazing. So that is the history in a nutshell. I'll just jump ahead to the next slide. The next slide I was going to show is our investor base, which is it is a list of our investors. Their names that your participants have probably heard of before. DRW, I already mentioned. Virtu, which is a publicly traded company. It's a prop trading group. In the crypto native firms, the digital currency group that you see there in that logo, there are multiple groups underneath that umbrella for DCG, and one of them is actually the company that created the tracking stock GBTC, which your audience probably knows of for people that want to invest in crypto, in Bitcoin, but don't have the ability to open up an account, or they don't feel comfortable opening an exchange account. And then also Consensus there, Joe Lubin is on our board, and he is actually one of the founders of Ethereum. In addition to this list, you could see some of the exchanges that have also invested in AirSex, CBOE, CME, and NASDAQ. But the piece that really got me excited before I came over to AirSex was, based on my previous background, I always have recognized the importance of having a good, healthy mix of participants within an exchange. So seeing that a Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, and TradeStation also made investments in AirSex, and Fidelity and TradeStation are both very active on the platform, got me excited to actually join the team at AirSex. So we've built a great ecosystem of participants within AirSex. Next, I'm going to jump over to the coins that we actually list right now. They include Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, and we recently listed a stablecoin called USDC. I would say that in the second half of this year, my product team is making an aggressive push towards adding new coins. So we're already going to be having, actually, it's timely. Today we're going to have a meeting to discuss what our plans are for the roadmap of adding new coins. And we do have internally here, Clay, and to your audience, a very strict policy when it comes to listing coins, that we need to make sure that it completes certain criteria. And then once it's satisfied our requirements, it actually goes to our executive committee to make a decision. And then as an added layer of step, I should say, it goes to our risk committee, which includes members who are not from the, I would say, from not industry, outside of the industry, that participate in that review. So next, I'm going to jump into the trading
John,
interfaces. Yeah,
just
sure.
in terms of my curiosity, so how does a coin basically get proposed for addition? Is that something that the platform users bring to you, or you guys are just out there kind of adding as a matter of course?
I would say it's actually driven by client demand and customer demand, but it's a very strict process when we consider it, and there's several key factors that have to be considered. One of them, and one of the most important, is the coin considered a security? Is it centralized? This kind of goes to what some of your users may have read about XRP. XRP is centralized, and the SEC had concerns about that, and it's actually going through a review process right now. And ultimately, we'll find out if the SEC decides that it truly is not a security. And then there's also, it's driven by demand. Also depends on which protocol it's on. Like right now, there are tokens that are on what's called the ERC20 protocol, which is what Ethereum is based on. That makes it easier for us to actually load those up and add them into the platform. And those are just a couple of them. We're also looking at short and long-term demand. We don't want to list a coin that's a overnight sensation and it's a flash for 2 weeks and then the coin fizzles out. So we're looking at long-term viability, and then also because of our bit license in New York. New York has what's called a green list, and that green list is the approved coins that are allowed to be listed in New York. So we try to follow by that as well.
Thank you.
And my pleasure. I'm going to jump ahead here to our trading interfaces. So we have different ways for your users to interact with AirSex. Those include either through our mobile application, which I'll show in a second, also through our web applications, which are from the desktop. We have what's called a quick trade ticket, and we also have what's a little bit more advanced is our trading UI. So I'll jump ahead to the next slide.
Yeah, and I'll just
this is
say, having got the opportunity to work with your team, so I want to keep making the link that once your IRA, so Advanta, if you have an Advanta IRA, we as the custodian would send money to AirSex. It appears right away on the platform, and then at that point, the account holder, the IRA holder, has the login and is able to operate these tools as they see fit, because all of it is operating under the auspices of this account that your IRA owns at AirSex. So this is not something where you have to keep coming back to the custodian to make decisions or trade. You would be able to do that as the account holder on the platform. So sorry to interrupt, John, but I just wanted to clear that up.
No worries. Thank you. So this initial slide is just an example of what the portal will look like for your users. So once they become approved by AirSex, and then they would actually have a username and login, they would actually have what's called access to our exchange member portal, which we call our EMP. Within this portal, you'll be able to see your balances for the different coins, which is the banner along the top there. You'll be able to see deposits coming in. And then also to the left, which is expanded at the bottom there, is what we call our quick trade ticket. For users that are on the event that come through in Advanta that don't want a more sophisticated trading tool, they're just looking to quickly put Bitcoin or one of the other digital currencies within their portfolio, is this quick trade ticket. So they would pick the asset class, in this example, Bitcoin. If they wanted to buy $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, they would hit buy. The next window would show how much Bitcoin they would be purchasing, and if they agreed to that amount, they would complete the transaction, and then it would actually be set up within your account, and you would have access to that Bitcoin. I'm going to jump ahead to the next slide, which is the AirSex member portal, which is the mobile version of the of our trading tool. So this is actually just the EMP part. I'm going to show you the trading piece in a second, but it quickly shows you your balances on AirSex. It shows you the inbound money, the funds, I should say, fiat coming into the account, and there's a sample there of the ability to trade as well. And also within that member portal for the mobile version, you can actually see the order book, you could see history of transactions that are happening, and you can get more color on the marketplace. The next is actually our trading UI. And I'm going to take, after the samples here, I should say the slides, I'll show an active version of the UI, but this is a snapshot of it, of what the trading UI would look like and that your users would be using. So if they wanted something a little bit more advanced, they could actually log into that using the UI. And to take a step back, up here in the right-hand corner, it'll actually say trade right there. If you wanted to access the trading UI, you would click on that icon, it would take you to the next screen. Here's another example of the mobile version that I was talking about. The first screen is the quick order, is an order ticket that somebody would actually be able to place orders within the book. Another at the bottom of the different windows that you can open up, which is trade, order book, history, charting, orders, and so forth. So these are the other screens you could actually toggle between. And then I'm going to flip over now before I go into regulation, an example of what the trading UI looks like. So I'm going to pull that up now. And this is actually a streaming live version of our book right now. So right now, you're actually able to see buys and sells in the book, and it's actually dynamic right now. You could see that Bitcoin is, there's somebody willing to buy at 50,173. There's offers on the book. We've got charting in the platform. To the right is the trade history of orders that have been executed on our book over the last 24 hours. As you can tell at the top near the left there is the amount of Bitcoin we've executed, which is 1,067 Bitcoin in the last 24 hours. And then just off of that is our order entry ticket. The order entry ticket would allow you to put in your price and your quantity. If you clicked on a bid here, it would actually auto-populate. You could kind of see it grayed out because I'm not logged in right now, but you see the 50,156. It would actually quickly populate that as your buy. And then also you can have the ability to do some algos in there if you wanted to peg your order and put with an offset to the bid. You can actually enter it in there as well. And then the bottom half here is your open orders and your working orders, and then your executed orders as well. So I'm gonna jump back into the slides now. And as I touched on earlier with the audience, just wanted to highlight again that we've really taken a strong approach when it comes to regulation. So you might look at, your users might, or your audience might know of Coinbase and Gemini. They're focused on spot. And then you have what's called backed and the CME, which are purely focused on futures. We actually straddle the middle of both of them. So we're unique when it comes as an exchange where we have access to physically and cash settled futures, as well as trading spot, which your users would actually be signing up for at AirSex. And we've taken it a step further with our licensing. So when you look at a Coinbase or Gemini, they do not have a DCO or a DCM. We're actually federally regulated with the CFTC, and our exchange rule set for spot and futures is actually filed with the CFTC. We also have the 50 money transmitter licenses throughout the US, and we have what's called the New York Bit license, which I touched on earlier today. Just highlighting here that we're not only regulated on the federal level, we're also regulated on the state level. Next is a snapshot of the United States and all of our money transmitter licenses. One quick update to the group, I would say earlier this week, we actually received approval in Nevada. So the only one that's outstanding right now is Virginia. I plan on updating the slide shortly after the meeting. And then lastly is a group of different ways to get information about AirSex. So Clay, I covered some of the topics in here. I could dig more into other areas if you'd like. If there was questions that are coming in, I could answer those as well.
Well, I'd love to, there's a few things that you and I talked about that I thought I would just kind of, if we could have a short discussion about them. I know that, and I'll just start with the first one, is fees. So I know that people are always asking us, you know, from a Advanta standpoint, what do we charge for our service? And so if you could touch on a little bit how AirSex works, fees and the revenue model and stuff like that, that would be great.
Sure. So the way that it works is that once your participants become members of AirSex, if that being an LLC or a direct member, which you touched on in your slides, which we have access to as well, is that the execution charge is 50 basis points. That 50 basis points is on the execution itself. Your users would not get billed separately. So it's actually a small nominal value that's deducted from the execution itself.
Okay. And then the other thing that, you know, you and I had spoken about earlier, just in terms of kind of everybody's, you know, temperature in terms of how, you know, how do I make sure that I'm covered on this kind of stuff? So can you talk a little bit about storage at AirSex and what that would look like?
Sure. The way that we've set it up right now is I like to call it a closed loop system, so that if you're a participant of Advanta and you become approved on AirSex to trade cryptocurrencies, you would actually be able to deposit funds either through wire or ACH into your account. Those funds would become available. You'd be able to use one of the trading user interfaces that I described before, Quick Trade Ticket or the trading UI. You would execute your orders on AirSex, and then you would actually see your coin balances in the exchange member portal. They would sit there, and then also at that point, you would not be able to withdraw fiat from the account or coin to an external wallet. And then if your user decided to sell out of that position and they wanted to move the funds back to Advanta, we'd actually be able to send those funds back to Advanta. Speaking from a security standpoint, we actually work with a third party called BitGo. We're actually agnostic when it comes to custody. You'll find some exchanges that actually focus on custody and technology and matching engine technology. We feel that our strength and our focus is on the technology, and that's where we should be. And that's why we have not decided to go down the path of creating our own custody solution. So we work with BitGo, and BitGo, we've set up a series of hot and cold storage, where at times that the coin could actually be in hot storage, and there are times where it could be in cold storage. Cold storage means that the coin is completely offline. It's not accessible to the network. Some providers will actually take that device and might even actually put it in a vault at a safe at a bank. It gives you kind of an idea of some of the security. Also, wanted to highlight too, we actually just recently went through what's called a SOC 2 test. It's a very thorough test that was done by an outside auditor. And under that, it actually looks for specific criteria for managing customer data. And it actually is basically checking the security of your system. And we actually just got approved for that, I would say, less than a week ago. So we're going to actually have a press release very shortly on that.
Interesting. So one of the things that you said that I'll just get into a little bit more detail just because it has particular germane to IRA investors is you mentioned the fact that the fiat cash flow goes directly from Advanta to the platform over at AirSex, and at that point it does become under the control of the account holder. So trading, whether you're buying or selling or any of that kind of thing, that's all up to the account holder. But the fiat currency, as well as the ability to move the cryptocurrency out of that, really still lies with the custodian. So the account holder would not have the ability to unilaterally take cash or cryptocurrency off of AirSex if it's an IRA that owns it. Now, that's one of the things that had been troublesome about the relationship between custodians and exchanges, which is that the custodian needs to have custody. That's part of the job of the custodian. And so the fact that you guys have arranged it in such an easy manner where the fiat currency flow as well as the ability to move the cryptocurrency out lies with the custodian is really something that again, for those of you who are tried to accomplish this before, it's a relatively new phenomenon. So I just wanted to specify that that's from a user standpoint and from an IRA user standpoint, that's what's going to happen. You will direct Advanta to send cash to AirSex, and then it arrives there, it shows up on your portal, and at that point, you're the one who has the login there. And I'll also specify, and this is, John, you and I have looked at the operation of how an IRA gets set up at AirSex, and there's the IRA account holder goes through the same kind of member onboarding process as a non-IRA investor. That's correct, yes?
That's correct, yes.
And so you're actually going to go through the AirSex procedure of establishing membership with them, but then you're going to specify that it's going to be an IRA, and that enjoins those restrictions in terms of where the cash can go to and from, as well as the ability to move the cryptocurrencies, or inability to move the cryptocurrencies into a wallet of your own unilaterally, because that is the thing that has really been, it's new for this relationship between IRA custodians and exchanges. And the thing that it allows is for us to not charge anything other than our regular IRA custody fees. And so AirSex gets to charge the fees that they charge for regular personal transactions as well. And so you're really not, in the past, an IRA operating a system like this has had to pay more fees in most cases. And that's starting to change quite a bit. And certainly this is an example of one of those relationships. So the other thing I wanted to just ask was, in terms of when you guys, the obligations, so we talked a little bit about the fact that that exchanges have a lot of regulatory things that come at them. So are there things that that are going to be coming towards exchanges in terms of regulatory changes, or do you feel like that's settled down a good bit, or what does the environment look like for an exchange that is kind of building what they're offering?
I would say, I mean, right now with the new administration, there are question marks to see how Gary Gensler, the SEC, and Janet Yellen will view cryptocurrencies. But I think what's really driving the whole space is mass adoption, and what we're seeing from the institutional space. This mass adoption and what we're seeing is really, I think, going to be setting the tone for the future, because these key participants would not be getting involved in the space. You've got Fidelity, who came out with news about how they're actually creating a crypto ETF. You've got one of the largest custodians in the world, Bank of New York, with trillions and unders. I think I'm looking at my stats here, 41 trillion in assets under management, and they've actually been public with saying that they're going to have a solution at the end of the year to custody coin for their participants, for their users. And then also, I think just also talking about greater adoption, and I always like to highlight this to people is, and it's just an amazing numbers. I think was really truly a pivot point for the industry. I would say 4 or 5 months ago, if it was that, was the news about PayPal. And to put things into perspective, prior to the PayPal news, there were only 100 million crypto wallets ever created. People who had money in a crypto wallet. Overnight, you basically had PayPal with 350 million users now having access to crypto. That's a huge driver for the space. That's massive for retail adoption, being able to touch that many users. And then also you look at some of the things now too with news that's come out from Citi's research department in Guggenheim, where they talk about a multiple in the next couple of years of 350,000 for Bitcoin. And that's driven by not only institutional adoption, but retail adoption. And I think that we're paving the way for tremendous growth.
And then, the other thing I wanted to just talk about, because you and I have spoken about this as we, especially in our initial conversations about, hey, what would it look like for an IRA investor to invest with you guys, is the timeline for setting up an account. Because I know, from my own personal experience, that setting up personal accounts at an exchange, especially with my technological level of understanding, sometimes is really time consuming, and it takes a while for that to be reviewed. So what does AirSex look like in terms of the timetable of somebody being able to open up an account and be ready to kind of start working?
Sure, it depends. So there's two flavors here that we're going to talk about. So the first one is the direct member portal piece that we just discussed earlier, which is similar to somebody who wanted to open up a regular retail account on AirSex, but this time it's focused on their IRA. If they go through the steps that are required and everything aligns correctly, let's say that there's no anomalies with the application, that there's a question about something that gets flagged within the KYC questions, or sometimes it requires an extra check if somebody's government ID is different than the address that they put into the platform. That actually slows down the process slightly. But if everything is in alignment, we can actually get an application through and approved within technically minutes. If it does require some extra handholding, we hope to get these done within 24 to 36 hours, I would say. If you're going to open up an LLC account, since that is an entity, it requires some extra steps by our client service and onboarding team. We've been trying to shoot for anywhere from 5 to 10 business days to approve that account. The team has been doing an amazing job, and they have been getting in those approvals well below that number that I mentioned, but I use it as a benchmark for getting these approved. So once they're approved, and then we receive advances approval as well. Once we have that in place and you deposit the funds, within 24 hours you could be trading.
Okay. And so just to let people in on what we did just in terms of practice, one of the things that's interesting is that, typically for an IRA holder, the IRA always comes first. Make sure that you have the IRA open and things like that. In this particular case, it is, you're going to need to go through, as an investor, as an account holder, you're going to need to go through the member process,
portal.
Right? The member portal for AirSex anyway. So you could actually do that even if you don't have your account at Advanta yet. So you could go through that member process and still be ready to go. One of the other things that's really I think a step forward in terms of IRAs and exchanges is just that you don't have to have everything all the way lined up with your IRA custodian beforehand. You can start the member process, get some of that out of the way, open up your account with us, and then we work on the transfer. And there's still no question about it, there's still some activity that needs to take place. It's going to take a little bit of time, but it's not quite as rigid because of the technology the way it is. AirSex can put a kind of boundaries, the appropriate boundaries on the IRA money. so that again, we feel like we're covered from a custodian standpoint.
And also just to add, Clay, I mean, the partnership that we've formed with Advanta, we've actually been able to streamline the onboarding process. So it's actually been key to helping your accounts quickly onboard with AirSex.
Oh, good. Okay, well, let's get into some questions here, and there's quite a few. So I'm gonna see if I can get these, and if we don't get to your question during this, and we may not get to all of these, we'll definitely answer the questions after the fact. So don't feel like you won't get the answer, but we may not cover it in the webinar today. Okay, so what is the minimum account size to open an IRA with Advanta? So I would say there is no minimum. Our fee schedule does at some point with lower cash thresholds. Sometimes the fees could, if your account is under $1,000 or something like that, the fees could start to eat that up so quickly that the ROI might not make sense for you. So there is no set minimum, and so that's really up to you in terms of paying the fees and that kind of thing. And John, for AirSex, are there minimums or maximums, anything like that folks would need to know?
There are no account minimums for AirSex to register.
Okay. And the next question is, and I know you covered this real briefly, could you reiterate what the currencies are that are available at the moment at AirSex?
Yeah, of course. It would be Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, and then we recently listed a stablecoin, USDC.
Okay, great. Next
And then
question
just to add to that, Clay, just to expand on that, like I said earlier to the audience, we do have plans to expand on that list for the tail end of this year.
And if you do decide to adopt something else, is that a general press release? Is that just on your website? How do you guys let folks know that?
We'll be very forthcoming with the information, and we would actually have a press release and probably a market notice to our user base.
Okay, great. Next question is kind of about advances, fees, and things like that. So, as I say, our fees are basically based on our bookkeeping labor, and because of this the way that this investment works, we don't charge anything other than our regular fee schedule. So what it would look like is this: it's $50 to open the account. That's obviously one time only. There's a $95 transaction fee for the establishment of this AirSex account as an asset in your IRA. And then the annual fee schedule is the same one as we use for everything else. If the cash value that you're putting over at AirSex is going to be $30,000 or more, you would use our flat annual fee, which is $295 per asset per year. And understand that your account at AirSex is one asset, even if you have multiple coins in there and that kind of thing. So it would still be counted as just one asset. If it's under 30,000, it could be a little bit less than $295 a year. So that's basically how we are going to charge our fees. It's right off of our standard fee schedule. And John also mentioned the fees that you would incur at AirSex. And that says, do you have 401k and Roth products and things like that? So let me just specify that all of our account types can invest at AirSex. So traditional or Roth IRA, health savings account, even education savings accounts. We do offer a solo 401k. The solo 401k plan does allow for a Roth option. So for those of you who are self-employed, you might be choosing a solo 401k or a SEP IRA. All those account types are allowed to be used over at AirSex. Can I combine both my IRA and my Roth IRA in one Advanta account? Unfortunately not, because the tax status of a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA are separate. Those are always going to need to be accounted for separately. I have seen them sometimes combined in an LLC. So in other words, your traditional IRA and your Roth IRA are investors in an LLC that then becomes a legal entity that can go out and invest. But because they're different tax statuses, they will always at their core be in different accounts. Next question is, any plan to have Doge in the near future?
There is some talk about it, but there's no definitive plans right now to add Doge into the platform. I do know that some of our competitors have added the coin. I don't think it's actually listed on Coinbase right now, though.
And so this next one is an interesting one too as well. So this is a person who's familiar with most of the U.S. exchanges. So how is AirSex different from Kraken? This one says Binance US and CB. So just how has AirSex differentiate itself from other exchanges?
Yeah, I would say it's a couple of different things. So one, I would say, just a second here, let me just fix my screen. I would say it's customer service and market ops. So we have a team that's actually going to pick up the phone if you have questions or concerns. We're available 24/7, the market ops group. The client service group is available 7 to 7, Monday through Friday, and that's Eastern time. So we have a team that's actually dedicated and open to taking your calls and helping you, unlike some of the other competitors in our space. Our pricing is transparent and competitive. If you look some of the other fee tables on other exchanges, they're convoluted and difficult to understand. We're actually 50 basis points to execute IRA accounts on AirSex. And then the last two I would say is one is regulation. Like I said earlier, we have the DCO and the DCM, which are federally chartered licenses. That's different than what you would actually see at a Coinbase or Gemini or Kraken. Kraken, I don't believe, actually has the New York BIT license. We have the New York BIT license, so we could support accounts in New York. And then lastly, I would say it's the team. Some of the other exchanges come from different backgrounds. Ours come from a capital markets background. As I mentioned earlier, I've been with other exchanges. I've built 10 different exchanges in different capacities. Our COO has actually built even more than me, 16. He's spent time at Chi-X and some others. Our CEO has worked at places where he was the head of prime brokerage at Barclays and Citi. He's also spent time at Citi Prime and Barclays and Citi and Citadel, I should say. And lastly, our CTO is the one who created the matching engine technology for the CME, and he actually came over and built our matching engine technology. And then, speaking of matching engine technology, our matching engine is not in the cloud. It's actually bare bones metal within a data center, which shows stronger resiliency.
Okay. So there's a question here that says, can an investor use any of the exchanges like Coinbase Pro, Binance in the US? And so I'll just answer that from an IRA perspective, which is the IRA can, yes. It's really been the exchanges that have, either limited your ability to have your IRA invest there, right? So the exchange is not only choosing the currencies that they're going to offer, but also their procedures and what entities they will allow, as well as their fees and security and all that kind of other stuff as well. So some of them will handle IRA direct investment. Some of them will handle just LLCs, and some of them will handle neither of those. So it really is exchange specific in terms of whether the investor can have their IRA invest there or not. And I'm sorry to say that I don't have a list of which is which, and my suspicion is that it's always changing anyway. And so that's what it looks like at the moment. That's what the playing field.
Can I just expand on what you're saying too? Is
yeah,
to go back to our customer service, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking with those direct members, being able to get them quickly through our approval process as possible. If you look to some of the other exchanges, if you tried to open an LLC, those lead times could be, and I've spoken with people in the space, can be anywhere from upwards of 3 months, and you're lucky at that point to actually get a response because they have such a bad, deep backlog, and they don't have tools in place to actually respond to all the inbound requests. Our team is efficient and they're moving these applications fast and furious through the pipeline, and that's why we're actually able to get these direct members through, hopefully within 24 hours, and those LLCs between 5 and 10 business days, and that's on the longer end, I should say.
Got it. Yeah, I appreciate that. So what is the difference in risk to the investor between AirSex versus direct with an exchange? So I'm going to let you weigh in on this as well, John, but I will say this from my perspective. What we are talking about is an IRA and custodian, and your Advanta IRA it's a direct relationship with AirSex as an exchange. And so the process is you authorize us to send fiat currency out of your IRA to AirSex. It shows up and you can do that via wire or ACH.
Mm-hmm.
It shows up on your portal, and away you go until such time as you want to move it back to your Advanta IRA cash position. So I would say that the risk factors that you're looking at are the same as they always would be, which is simply that you want to do due diligence on Advanta, you want to do due diligence on AirSex, and also just kind of think about the due diligence on the cryptocurrencies that you're investing in and the security procedures at AirSex and things like that. So all those factors are going to come into play. But I would say that in answer to your question, we are talking about a relationship where it is an IRA provider and an exchange with a direct relationship. It's just that, and so the account holder is really authorizing that relationship to initiate, and then also making the trades and the investment decisions while the IRA funds are at the exchange. So did you want to have any other thoughts on risk there, John? For the
Yeah, I was
investor?
going to say that AirSex is not a trust provider, so that's why there's a relationship between Advanta and AirSex. You would not be able to roll over funds from another account into AirSex because we wouldn't be able to facilitate that. So that's why you would need to work with an Advanta. If you wanted to open up a direct account and trade in that account outside of your IRA, you can come to the exchange direct to do that as well.
So I did have a couple of questions about fees again. So let's run through that real quickly again. So at Advanta, what we see as a transaction is you establishing your account at AirSex. The transactions that occur within that account at AirSex, we at Advanta do not charge for. Those are not individual transactions for us. But AirSex does charge for those, so they will be part of your total ROI. And so, John, can you run down that again for them?
Sure, it's a 50 for orders that are executed on AirSex. If it's a direct member or an LLC, that charges 50 basis points. For those executions, that charge is actually deducted from the notional value of the trade. And also, we do not at this time charge for custody, where some of our competitors actually charge for custody.
Gotcha. So one of the questions here is about insurance, and it starts out with FDIC insurance. So I will just say that from our perspective at Advanta, your cash position at Advanta does have FDIC insurance. Anytime we disperse funds to an investment, whether it's AirSex or real estate or any of that kind of stuff, we're not involved in the insurance that's involved with that. So in some cases, you as the account holder can establish insurance. It just kind of depends on the asset and where you're investing. So thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I'm not at liberty to go into full detail, but I will say that we do have an insurance policy with the top tier insurance firm that protects against theft and hack. And then also, as an extra layer, our custody provider does have an insurance policy too.
Okay. So there's a question here about and it just gives an example. If we wanted to start with $1,000, are we just buying a portion of a coin? And I'll let you answer that, John.
Yeah, it goes to what I was saying a little bit earlier about being able to buy Bitcoin in fractions of a penny. These purchases go out multiple decimal places. So yes, you could purchase coin for $1,000. A minimum price order, so I should say, minimum increment that we have for executions is $50 for Bitcoin right now.
Okay. So there's some tax questions as well. So I think that I will answer this from an IRA perspective first, and then John, if you want to weigh in on how people's if they're investing personally. But the from an IRA perspective, all of the activity that you're going to be doing here in terms of cryptocurrency is going to be under the umbrella of the tax advantage. So let's say that you do a really great job, you make a purchase, and then there's some earnings and it comes back. Those are all protected under the account type. So whether that's traditional or Roth or whatever. So when it comes to your IRA, there's really only usually three things that have the possibility to interact with your personal tax world. One is if you make a contribution to a traditional. Two, if you take a distribution from a traditional. And three, if you take a non-qualified distribution from a Roth, or if you do a traditional to Roth conversion. So all those things have the immediate potential of affecting your personal tax world. The investment activity within your IRA when it comes to cryptocurrency is not going to have any impact on your personal taxes. And for those of you who are familiar with IRAs, you know that in very certain circumstances, something called UBIT, unrelated business income tax, can come into play as a cost of doing business within your IRA. That would not come into play in this particular circumstance. So from an IRA investment standpoint, there's not going to be any tax impact on what you're doing. John, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I would say you're the expert when it comes to taxes.
Okay, great. So there's a great question here. Once invested, do you provide advice on trading? So I will say from the Advanta standpoint, no, we do not. We do not give advice when it comes to that kind of stuff. John?
Yeah, I would say that another project for the back end of this year is about education. We've put a tremendous amount of effort into building up our margin platform that we're going to be launching hopefully once we get approval from the CFTC, but it's about education. So we're going to actually start creating online videos. We're going to start putting up FAQs and working with the user base so that they have a better grasp of how to trade the space.
Terrific. So there's a question here about those Advanta account holders that have checkbook control, that LLC is a subset of their IRA. And so the question is basically, do you need to go to it through Advanta, or how does it work? So I'll just answer it this way, and John, you can add whatever you feel like is appropriate. So at that point, once you have the LLC funded as a subset of your IRA at Advanta, generally speaking, you have your cash position at a bank somewhere. It's not with us. And so at that point, the manager of the LLC, again, typically who is the account holder, will go to AirSex and be able to establish an account in the name of the LLC. So from that perspective, from us, we really we don't need to be involved in that procedure. However, it is one of those things where, our relationship with the operations guys at AirSex is always evolving, and usually the more information they have about what's going on, the better, so that we can all establish the account appropriately and that kind of thing. But you wouldn't need necessarily to come to us first in order to establish that LLC with AirSex. That's something that you could do, because again, an LLC is a legal and financial entity that's actually separate. The fact that it has IRA money in it is, to some extent, incidental when it comes to establishing the account. So John, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to expand on that, if there's interest in opening an LLC account at AirSex, that's correct. You would actually be able to deposit those funds via wire or ACH from your bank account. You would actually send a note into onboarding at AirSex, which is on the screen right now, and provide the name of the LLC and actually your name. And what we would do is actually we would send a packet, an entity packet, over to you through DocuSign. You would complete that packet, and then once completed, we would begin the onboarding process, and you'd be able to set up with an account here at AirSex.
Excellent. So here's one. Could you explain dollar cost averaging, and if it's possible to use this strategy using my Advanta IRA account? So I'm going to have to punt because I cannot explain dollar cost averaging. John, do you want to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not giving any investment advice at all, but if it's just typical. If you want to, if you see a move in Bitcoin and you see it making a downward move or something in one of the other coins, and you want to acquire, pieces of that position along the way down in dollar cost, you definitely have the ability to do that if you're funded in your account.
Okay. Does AirSex BTC wallet address prevent Bitcoin from being deposited directly?
Right now, we do not allow you to deposit Bitcoin from an external wallet into AirSex. That is something that I am working with the product team to enable. We do have it in certain situations where we can do one-offs where we can allow it. We just haven't streamlined the processes in place, but it's something that we could discuss if there's a request. Goal is I'm trying to automate the process and making it as streamlined.
Okay. So the next question is there any difference for a 401k? And so I'm glad you brought this up. So a solo 401k, again, it's very similar to a checkbook control LLC in some ways. A 401k plan is a legal and financial entity, and you, typically the account holder is the trustee, and you can approach and establish a relationship with AirSex in the name of that 401k plan. And again, this is something that unless we at Advanta are doing the bookkeeping and serving as the cash position for your solo 401k, which we do offer, if that's the case, then yes, we are involved. If you are the trustee of a solo 401k and your cash position is at a bank or a brokerage house or someplace outside of us, it's really more of a direct relationship with AirSex. But I know, because we've had people ask, that it is possible to do so. Yes, John?
That's correct. We actually support LLCs and solo 401ks, and similar to what I said before about sending the note to onboarding at AirSex, you would just indicate that you would like to open a solo 401k versus an LLC.
Got it. When you sign up for AirSex as an individual, can you still have can your IRA be involved? So, John, if somebody were going to have both a personal account at AirSex and an IRA account, is that one of the things that they can differentiate when they're in the member portal? Or how? We haven't specifically spoken about this because we've been dealing with people who are just IRA investors at the moment. Is it?
I think right now, and I'm going to have to defer to my product team after this, but I think right now the way it's set up is it would be two separate logins that you'd have to unfortunately use, but there are plans in the roadmap to actually make it so that only one login will access your direct and your IRA account.
Okay.
So it's not the most efficient right now, but there are plans to improve.
Got it. And this is something that we may have glossed over earlier. So, and I guess that's partially because, well, it doesn't matter. So, John, what are the elements of an exchange? So when we say exchange, what I perceive that we're talking about is an entity, an organization that can take fiat currency and essentially exchange it, or have it purchase cryptocurrency, and vice versa. So, but are there other things that characterize what an exchange is that it's important for folks to know?
I mean, I think that it is in its simplest and rawest form a matching engine where we actually combine buyers and sellers into a marketplace where you have market makers that are actually providing liquidity and trying to tighten spreads so that when inbound orders from retail come in, they'll get great execution quality. But it is regulated differently than if you were going to go to a trading desk to execute an order. That is actually called over the counter. It's called OTC versus exchange. And there's disparaging differences in the way the two are handled, because we're actually held to a much higher standard in regard, because that's why we have to go out and get those money transmitter licenses. That's why I've got the DCO, the DCM, which are very difficult to obtain and very time consuming. And then also, I'm governed as an exchange by fair access, which means I need to treat everybody equally when you come to my exchange, versus if you were going to go to an OTC desk, they can give preferential treatment to certain types of order flow. So if they find I like to use this word, a certain flow to be toxic, they might actually charge a premium for those orders to be executed in their system. So to bring it back in summary, there's a lot that goes into being an exchange just beyond being a matching engine. We're always subject to different audits from the regulators, either on the federal and state level, and we've put a tremendous amount of effort into obtaining our licenses on the state and federal level.
And I see that we're already kind of over our hour, and so I'm going to just ask a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up for today.
It's great to see the audience is so engaged. This is fantastic. Thanks,
They're great. They're great questions, no question. So we were talking about the fact that you can have a personal account at AirSex and an IRA account, and this question is kind of about how they might be able to interact with each other and how cryptocurrencies interact with annual contributions. So let me take a swing at this, and if I veer off of something, John, or you have a comment, please add it in.
Sure.
So necessarily, because your IRA and your personal finances have different tax status, those accounts are going to need to stay separate. And as John said, at the moment, it sounds like at AirSex you would actually have separate logins for the two for just added simplicity at the moment. And at
Mhm.
some point down the line, perhaps that changes, but perhaps not. And I would say that, from our perspective as a custodian, the more separation there is and the more obvious it is, the better the better it
Of
is,
course.
because it's easier to track. In terms of annual contributions in cryptocurrencies, that's not yet available. All contributions to any account, whether it's an IRA with us or with Schwab or Fidelity, at the moment are in fiat currency cash. Maybe that will change in the future, maybe not. That's tough to know. And in terms of the two accounts operating at AirSex at a particular given time, I suspect that what the person is asking is saying, hey, can I make a contribution from my personal AirSex account that has Bitcoin in it over to my IRA? And at the moment, no. There's a number of reasons for that. Contribution rules for one, our bookkeeping for another. And as I say, it's going to be really important for you as the account holder too to keep those two accounts completely discrete, so that it's very easy in case you ever got audited to be able to say, yes, this one has the tax advantages, this has is in my personal tax world. So, John, anything on that one?
I think you nailed it. I mean, there's
Yeah.
definitely a wall between the two of them, and I think there's a reason for that, and it's obviously for tax purposes.
Okay, great. So let's see. So it says, and I think that'll make this the last one. So it's an interesting one in as much as it talks about traditional to IRA to Roth conversions. Because I do hear one of the strategies that people use in the conversion space are, if they're going to invest in something that has the possibility for an outsized return, they will often make a conversion from traditional to Roth so that the investment is made in a Roth, so that presumably if the investment does pay off, then all the earnings would be tax-free, again assuming a qualified distribution. So I would say that all occurs prior to your investment with AirSex. Now, that's not to say that you could not convert midstream. So you always can convert cash and assets in a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. And what that means is that the value of that cash and assets, whatever it is, whatever amount, gross amount that you're going to convert, means that goes on your taxes as income for that in that tax year of the conversion. So that's how it goes from pre-tax money to post-tax money. So what that might mean on a conversion of cryptocurrency is, what is the value of it on that day that you made the conversion? Generally speaking, people will convert ahead of time. They'll convert cash and then have that moved over to AirSex. But you are able, from a regulatory standpoint, to convert cash or assets. So that is possible. And I do think it's an excellent thing to be thinking about in terms of your strategy, because the overall tax burden can definitely change according to the account type. Okay, last one, and this is a very specific one about your fees, and we've had a lot of interesting questions about your fees.
Mhm.
The 50 basis points is taken from the trade. Is there a discounted fee for larger trading activity similar to other exchanges?
We do not have tiering. We keep it transparent and flat pricing. And I think
Okay.
that if you look at some of the other exchanges right now, I would say that we're extremely competitive. I would say if you look at some of the others, their fees can be anywhere from 1.5% to 2%. And then also there is a question about the execution quality and how your execution is comparing to the overall market. And we feel pretty confident that when you're going to get an execution, there's going to be limited slippage and you're going to be happy with the execution.
Okay. All right. Well, there are other questions, and so as I said before, I will print them out and make sure that we answer the questions, even if we didn't get to them here on the presentation. I really appreciate everybody submitting your questions. There were a lot of them, and they were excellent. So I really appreciate that. And John, I think let's go ahead and wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for joining us, but especially you for spending your time and giving us your expertise. Any parting thoughts for us?
Yeah, no, Clay, I appreciate you hosting me again, and it's been great to work with Advanta. One thing that I'd like to note is we included the onboarding at AirSex email address. That's if you had questions about, how to complete the paperwork and so forth. But if you have overall questions about the exchange, those can be sent to info@airsex.com. And I actually see those inbound questions that come through, and I'll make an effort to answer them promptly as soon as they come in. And lastly, look forward to your user base and participants taking advantage of AirSex. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It was great to have you, John. And as you said, my contact information is also there for follow-up questions. So this can be an ongoing conversation. So please do feel free to use John and myself as ongoing resources. The presentation was recorded today, and for anybody who signed up for the webinar, you will receive an automatically generated email in the next day or so with a link to the recording. So please do feel free to go back to review and see if that brings up any further questions for you. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. I hope that this was informative, and have a great day.
Thanks, Clay. Take care, all.
See you, John.